Good morning.
Morning, Doug.
Okay, pick up at 5B, around the middle of the page. Let's see, it's about halfway down, and there's a colon towards the end of the line. Let's see. So, okay, so we were talking about the verses. This one is going to be from Jeremiah, where God crying. So the prophet continues, "V'dama tidma v'terad eni dima ki nishba eder Hashem." I will weep, and it uses the kind of the double language, "Dama tidma." I will translate, "I shall surely weep," but the word for dama, tear, appears twice, and my ears will drip with tears again, dima, the third time, because God's sheep have been taken into captivity. Amar Blazer, shalosh demos lama. Why is the word dema for tear repeated 3 times in this verse? Achas al mikdash rishon, achas al mikdash sheni, achas al Yisrael shagal mukama. One for the first temple, one for the second temple, one for the actual exile of the people. Vikadamre, and some say, achas al bitul Torah. Maybe the third one is for the loss of time, the loss of Torah, or the loss of the study of Torah. Which is very interesting because it transforms the drama and the tragedy of the exile and the destruction of the temple into a more rabbinic idea, a post-temple world in which the ultimate holiness or the ultimate way to serve God in the rabbinic world is through Torah study. So Bishlomo Mandiawar Yisrael Shagalus, I understand the first version that it's on the people being exiled. That's the third tier, as it says, because the flock of God has been captured, right? So that's exile. But if you want to interpret that as the loss of the study of Torah, so how do you get that from because the flock of God was taken captive? So our answer is because that's the consequence of exile. Is you're not in. That means it's time for Daf Yomi. Sorry. Picture back up. The natural consequence of the exile is that the people can't study Torah anymore, which is a little shaky. But as I said,
do we know, historically speaking, do we know how long the exodus from Jerusalem, if you will, to Babel took at the first time?
Yeah, the general accepted period is 70 years.
70?
So, yeah. Of course, it depends on exactly when you count from and when you count to. 70 years, and that seems to accord with historical records, more or less. So really not that long a period, right?
I would have thought it was longer, because it's at least 600-700 miles, correct?
The
journey.
Suppose, yeah, that's true. So it's right there. Yeah. Okay. Rabbi Stott. Shlosha Kadosh Baruch Hu Bocha Alen B'Choyom. There are three types of people who God cries over daily. Al She'efshar Lasik B'Torah Ve'en Lasik, someone who has the opportunity to study Torah but does not. Al She'efshar Lasik B'Torah Ve'osik, and someone who really doesn't have the time to study Torah, and yet he does so anyway. V'al Parnas HaMiskal Tzibur, and over a community leader who is arrogant, who behaves as if it's coming to him, who's arrogant to the people that he. Interesting juxtaposition, right? What that has to do with the study of Torah is it's unclear. Rabbi Hamanaki Sefer Kinos. Rabbi was once holding the book of Lamentations. He was reading it. When they got to this verse, he shlich mishamayim eretz. He threw down the glory of Israel from heaven to earth. Nafal min yadeh. Then the book fell from his hand. Amri says, "Me'igra l'bira mikta," from a high roof to a deep pit, which is some kind of an idiom that they used. Commenting just on, how look how far the book has fallen, just like the Jewish people have fallen. Okay. Rabbi and Rechia were traveling and they were talking to each other. Right when they came to a certain town, they said, maybe there's a one of the rabbis here, one of the students of the rabbis, maybe let's go visit. So the people in the town said, yeah, there's a scholar who lives here, but he's blind. So Rechia said, Tivat, you stay here. Like, don't, you're the prince, like you're the big, you're the chief. You don't have to go visit this guy. I'll go visit him. Like maybe he should be coming to visit you. I'll go and visit him. But Rabbi insisted, and he went along with him. So they both went to visit the blind scholar. So they visited him, and they're about to leave. He said to them, you have visited somebody who can't see you, like you came to see me, but I can't see you. So you should merit to be visited by God, that he can see you, but you can't see him. So Rabbi said to Rechia, if I had listened to you and I hadn't come, I wouldn't have gotten this blessing from this guy. So they said to him, to the scholar, the blind scholar, where did you get this blessing? I heard it from the teachings of Rabbi Yaakov. Rabbi Yaakov used to visit his teacher every day. Kikash, when he got old, Amrle Loni Starmar, the teacher said to him, like, don't bother yourself. It's old, you're old, it's hard for you to walk. You're not well, you don't have to come visit me every day. You can't do it. Rabbi Yaakov said to him, is it a small thing that what's written about the rabbis, which is a verse from Psalms, he who sees wise men die will live forever and never see the pit of hell. So if you see wise men at their death, so certainly seeing them when they're still alive and vigorous is even more beneficial. So don't try to stop me from coming to visit you. Ravidi Avud Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idei, Ravidi, the father of Yaakov Bar Idei, he used to go on 3-month trips. And then he would only spend one day in between trips. Like he'd go for a 3-month trip. And I think basically to get to the base medrash, get the academy, and then he would only spend one day there, and then he'd turn around and go back. So the rabbis called him Bar Be Rav de Chadiyama, the one-day student. So he got upset. He said about himself, I'm being mocked by my colleagues. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, please, don't be dejected and don't bring punishment to the rabbis who mocked you. Rabbi Yochanan went to the base medrash and he taught as follows: God says, you'll seek me out every day to know my ways. So v'chiba yom darshano, so why lain darshano? So why is it referred to the day? Like we can also seek God at night. I'll tell you, but by emphasizing the day, it's telling you that even if you study Torah just one day of the year, then God credits you with the whole year. And so too with punishment. When God says to the spies in the desert, the number of you were touring the land for 40 days. I'm going to punish you for 40 years. The number of days that you were engaged in this mission, you're going to be punished. They were punished for 40 years, so they weren't engaged in the mission for 40 years. Hello, they were engaged in the mission for 40 days. But teaches you if you sin even one day in the year, it's counted against you like a whole year of sin. And that's why they were punished for 40 years. Okay, so we'll finish with that digression. Back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that a minor is exempt from pilgrimage sacrifice and from pilgrimage itself. So Ezu Katan, how young do you have to be exempt? The first view was if you can't, a child who is not old enough to ride on his father's shoulders to get up to the temple is exempt. But if he is old enough, then he does have to go. Maskela for Zera asked, Hecha man asya. So wait a second. So you're saying he can't go from, he's not old enough to go from Jerusalem up to the temple, which is, just you're walking up some stairs basically, or up a hill. So how did he get to Jerusalem in the first place, right? Obviously the kid's able to travel, right? He came from Tiberia to Jerusalem somehow. So what's the meaning of this criteria? I answered, so why did he come to Jerusalem? Because the whole family is coming to Jerusalem. Everybody's supposed to be happy. It refers here specifically to the mother. So IT say ime, so his mother brings him. So in other words, so you travel however you travel with a child, right? With a young child. So he's there's a reason that he came this far, and the reason he doesn't have to go any further is if he can hold his father's hand and walk up to the temple. Now here, this is actually the second view in the Mishnah, right? That you have to be able to walk under your own steam, holding your father's hand to be obligated. Vilo pater. So it seems to be mixing up the opinions. So Rabbi answered Beis Shammai's statement. The story of Samuel's birth was, his mother Hannah was barren, and she went and she prayed. She was blessed with a child, Samuel, and then after Samuel was born, she declined to go on the annual pilgrimage with her husband because the child was too young. So she said, "Wait until the child is weaned, and then we'll bring him to the temple." But he was old enough to but when you're weaned, let's assume that you get weaned at 2 years old, maybe. So you can sit up well before you're weaned. So he could have ridden on his father's shoulders. So he should have been obligated to go to the temple. So Rabbi's father said to him, according to you, Chana Gufa. How about Chana? Why didn't Chana go? Chana had an obligation to go, right? If that's your problem, ask about the mother also. Isn't she obligated to fulfill the mitzvah, maybe not of pilgrimage, but of simcha, of being happy, being with the family, having a nice meal, etc. Ella Chana mefankusa yesersa chazia b'shmuel. Chana saw that the baby was particularly delicate. She thought that he might, be that it might not be good for him to go on a trip like that. So then he become, it's a different category. Sure, she may have been obligated to go with her family, but there was an overriding concern of the health of her baby. So that's why she didn't go. Reb Shimon asked, what about if you're a minor who's lame? According to Beis Shammai's opinion. So Beis Shammai's opinion was that you have to be able to walk with your father to the temple, and then you're obligated. What if you're a minor and you're lame? So we've seen already that a person who's lame is not obligated. or child who is blind. Hechidami. So Gemara says, well, what are you asking? You're talking about like a permanent disability, or permanent blindness. So obviously, like an adult who's blind is exempt. So certainly a minor who's blind is exempt. Well, so you must be asking, you're talking about a child that sprained his ankle, right? Or temporary blindness. What's the rule? Like, since the reason, so an adult in such a situation is exempt, but an adult doesn't have the other concern which a minor has of education, right? He's already educated, but the minor, so his education isn't contingent on his blindness or his lameness, because that's something that will be healed, right? Meanwhile, you still need to be educated. Your brain is perfectly fine, it still needs to be educated. Good question. So Rabbi answers, so wherever an adult would be obligated from the Torah, then that's when you should educate the child. If an adult in the same situation would be not obligated, so a minor would also be. So in other words, you kind of you educate them, just if you're, whatever the situation would be, if you're an adult, that's how you conduct yourself if you're a child. So if it's a biblical exemption, then there's no need to bring the child. If it's only a rabbinic exemption, then biblically you should still, the person with such a situation would be obligated, and therefore you should bring the minor in such a situation as well. Okay, next thing in the Mishnah was, which is the more expensive, or the more expensive minimum? You have two sacrifices: the pilgrimage sacrifice and the festival sacrifice. There was an argument in the Mishnah between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. One said that which one of them has a minimum cost of one ma, and the other has a minimum cost of 2 ma. But the question is, which one has the smaller minimum, which has the larger minimum? Rabbi Shammai says it's the pilgrimage festival, pilgrimage sacrifice, which is minimum 2, and cost of 2 silver coins, and the Chagigah, the festival one, is minimum cost of 1. Sharia ola kula, because why is that? Because the pilgrimage one is an ola; it's completely offered on the altar; it's completely burned. Mashen came b'chagigah, not so the Chagigah offering, which is a shlamim. So the owners eat part of it, and the kohanim eat part of it. The so therefore it has a higher status. And that's why we say that has a higher minimum cost. We also find on Shavuos, that there are more ola offerings than shlamim offerings, because on Shavuos you have the offering that's brought with the new wheat crop called the shtei alechem. Those are olas. There are actually 10 olas and only 2 shlamim. So it indicates that olas trump shlamim in a way, right? That ola, like if you're commanded to bring on Shavuos 10 olas and 2 shlamim, which do you think is more significant? The ola. So the ola is the one that we spend more money on when it comes to the pilgrimage. Beis Hillel, remember, Beis Hillel says, no, it's the Chagigah, the festival offering, that requires a minimum of 2. Because there was a Chagigah offering before the revelation. We'll see what that's about in a minute. Masha'ein kain b're'iyah. That's not the case with the pilgrimage festival. That was only commanded by God at or after the revelation at Sinai. Viod, and furthermore, Matzina b'Nasim, Shariba and Akasim b'Shlamim Yosef b'Olas. You want to find a place where there's more shlamim offered than olas? Look at the dedication of the Mishkan. the dedication of the Mishkan, there were many more shlamim offerings brought by the princes of the tribes than there were olas. So there's a case where you see that shlamim appears to be more important. Basil and Maitama along with Beis Shammai. Okay, they both seem to have reasonable arguments, but why do they accept one's Basil take that argument over Beis Shammai's argument? Because certainly they agree that on Shavuos there are more olas than shlamim, right? The Kamras difim the ola kulola gavoa. So the Beis Shammai said two things. The first thing they said was that an ola gets completely offered to God, so therefore it must be more important than the Chagigah, which is only partly offered to God, and you eat the rest, right? So that argument, Adrabah, you would say the opposite. Chagigah difa. The Chagigah seems more important. These Beis achilos, because there's more parties have a share in it, right? God has a share, you have a share that seems to be superior than just one party having some of it. Okay, that's an argument too. With the Kamras Nelef Metzeres. Now, what about the Shavuos thing? Why do I prefer to? Why does Beis Hillel prefer the dedication offerings of the Mishkan as a model rather than the Shavuos? Done in Karban Yachid, because what are we talking about here with the Chagigah and the Riyah, with the pilgrimage and festival sacrifices? We're talking about individual sacrifices. They're not communal. Every person has to bring their own, right? So that we should take a model from the dedication of the Mishkan, in which each of the princes brought from their personal funds a personal offering, and use that as a model rather than Shavuos, which is a communal offering. Okay, that seems reasonable. Beis Shammai might tell along with Beis Hillel. Why does Beis Hillel nonetheless prefer their own argument? So Beis Hillel's argument was that, okay, so Chagigah was offered before the revelation at Sinai. So what about that? I think that the appearance sacrifice, the pilgrimage sacrifice, was also offered before the revelation. We'll see how that plays out in a minute. We're going to have to do an analysis of how that plays out. Your argument that you should rather use the prince's individual offerings at the dedication of the Mishkan as a model rather than Shavuos, not so fast. The dedication of the Mishkan was a one-time thing, whereas Shavuos is a perennial thing. So which should apply to the pilgrimage festival, and festival sacrifices. Those are also perennial. So we should use the model of the dedication sacrifices in which there were more shlamim than olas, and so the shlamim is more important. Now, Beis Hillel Ma'ishna Chagigah D'Yeshna L'fnei Dibur. So why did Beis Hillel say or argue that only the festival sacrifice has a model before the revelation, and not the appearance, not the pilgrimage sacrifice? So this is going to hinge on interpretations of the sequence of events at Sinai. So the way it's written in the Torah, if you just follow from the beginning of the book to the end, so you'll see that first there was the revelation, and then we have the details of the sacrifices that took place. There was a covenant and sacrifices and so on. Those all took place after the revelation. But the way the rabbis interpret it, didn't necessarily work that way. The story is told out of order. Like, the first we're told about the revelation, and then it says, and you know how this happened? First, they did this covenant and the sacrifices and everything. So let's see how Beis Hillel interprets the sequence of events. So in the chapter, so the way it's written in the Torah is you have the revelation, then you have a whole sequence of laws, the Parshas Mishpatim, and then it describes the covenant ceremony and the sacrifices. And there it says, they sacrificed shlamim offerings. So that sounds like a Chagigah, right? That's a Shlamim. So, but that's written in the same place. So you want to say that that took place before the revelation, fine. But it says they offered Shlamim and Olos, right? So like you can't have it both ways. Either none of them were before the revelation, or both of them were before the revelation. Because every Beis Hillel, so Gemara answers, Beis Hillel holds Ola Shekriva Yisrael Bamidbar Olas Tamid Havai. Oh, what kind of an Ola was that? That wasn't the Ola of appearance. Now you would think, like, it's natural to think that what is the parallel to the sacrifice offered at the revelation at Sinai? Well, that's the ultimate appearance before God, right? At the revelation at Sinai, that even trumps appearing at the temple, right? But Beis Hillel says no. The model, what it's modeling there for us, is the daily offering, the daily olah, and not the pilgrimage olah. Beis Shammai says olah shikri yisrael b'midbar olah sriya havai. That was more like a pilgrimage thing, because, as I said, that's the ultimate appearance before God. Amar Bai, so Bai says, Beishamai Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shmuel Kulus Firilahu. Ola Shekrivu Yisrael Bamidbar Olas Riyahavai. Beishamai, and not only Beishamai, but also Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shmuel all held that sacrifice at the covenant ceremony was the model, if you will, for the or in the category of the pilgrimage sacrifice. Beis Hillel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi, and Lili Kulus Firilahu, and the other opinions held by Beis Hillel and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi, it was the model there, or the category there, was the daily offering. Beis Shammai Hadamar. So we already saw Beis Shammai's opinion. Rabbi Shmuel, where do we get that Rabbi Shmuel accords with that opinion? Tanya, because we have a Bryce Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says, "Flawless now Rabbi Sinai." How did the teaching, the revelation of the Torah take place? At Sinai, at the revelation at Sinai, you got the broad strokes, you got the general rules. The details were expounded later on in the tent, that Moses communed with God. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva says, "Close upratos now Rabbi Sinai." Rabbi Akiva says, "No, everything was given at Sinai. V'nishnu b'olamoid, and it was repeated, or needed some reinforcement. Like, what did you say again, God?" So Moses was reminded reinforced when Moses encountered God in the tent, in the Ohel Moed, in the afterwards. And then the third time, they were taught again by Moses at the end of his life in the plains of Moab, the whole book of Deuteronomy, which, as we've seen many times, is a lot of repetition. I mean, that's how it's framed, that Moses's valedictory address. Now, if you think if you think that the Ola that was offered there was the model, or the category was the daily offering. It didn't accord to those rules, because it was not recorded that the space in question. Sorry, hold on one sec. Still there? Okay. So the sacrifice at the revelation, it's not recorded that it was flayed and cut up, which is the typical. When we talk about the Olas Tami, the daily sacrifice, there's a whole procedure of how it's to be, how the skin is flayed off, and so on. So, like, if you want to say it's like the daily sacrifice, it wasn't treated that way. Right, we don't see the details. Okay, Rabbi Elazar, and what about? So that's Rabbi Shmuel. So that's clear that he holds like Beis Shammai. And what about Rabbi Elazar? Where do we have that source? The Tanya, we have Brisa. Olas Tamid Asuya Bar Sinai. When it describes the daily sacrifice, the daily olah, it says the daily olah which was made at Mount Sinai. Now, what does that phrase mean? Karva. But the sorry, Maseh, Rabbi Elazar Maseh Nemru b'Sinai, the Amur Hasuya B'Har Sinai, it was the procedure was said at Sinai, but there was no actual tamid, actual daily sacrifice offered at Sinai. That only took place once the Mishkan was built, once the tabernacle was built. So what was this is a little convoluted interpretation, but this is Rabbi Elazar's interpretation, that the reference to Sinai, when we talk about the daily olah, is only a reference of the giving of the rules, but the sacrifice itself was not offered at Sinai. So therefore, what was the olah sacrifice offered at Sinai? That must be in the category of the appearance, the pilgrimage sacrifice. Rabbi Akiva, remember, Rabbi Akiva says, Karva v'shuv lo pascha. No, we actually started doing that sacrifice at Sinai and kept on going from there. Elamani Mekayim Hazvachim Umincha Higashim Li Bamidbar Arbaim Shana Beis Yisrael. So the prophet Amos says, did you bring me these sacrifices in the desert for 40 years? Implying that they did not, right? So so there was no, according to this verse in Amos, it appears that there was no offering of the daily sacrifice for all 40 years in the desert, which is a pretty weird thing, because like, what were they doing in the tabernacle, right? So Shivto Shalevi Shaladu Avodah Zarah. So Haini Krivosa. It is so Amos. So the way we understand this in Amos is that the people are being criticized by God through the prophet, saying that, like, where were you for 40 years in the desert? You didn't worship me. So we're interpreting it as that's the rest of the people. The tribe of Levi, who did not participate in the golden calf episode, right? Where they were the ones that took God's vengeance afterwards. So they were the ones who brought the sacrifices for 40 years in the desert. And what Amos is criticizing is the rest of the people, who basically says, you were a bunch of idol worshipers even in the desert. You're all a bunch of no good things. But excluding the tribe of Levi, and so it's the tribe of Levi who were involved with the preparation. And of course, the Kohanim were part of the tribe of Levi, so they actually did offer the sacrifices. This is kind of I would say it's a hyperbolic criticism of the rest of the people. Now, Beis Hillel, Hadi Amar. So we said the Beis Hillel and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili took the other approach, that the Olah was at Sinai, at the Revelation, was indeed in the category of the daily Olah. So Beis Hillel Hadi Amar. So we saw that explicitly said by Beis Hillel. Rabbi Akiva. We also just saw that Rabbi Akiva has that opinion in the last brayso that we just read. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, where do we see Rabbi Yossi Aglili take this opinion? Tanya, we have a brayso. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, there are 3 commandments, 3 mitzvahs that the Jewish people have to do on their pilgrimage. There's the pilgrimage sacrifice, the festival sacrifice, Chagigah, v'simcha. Shalmei Simcha, the joy offerings. Yesh b'ri'iyah she'ein b'shtein. There is a characteristic of the pilgrimage one that does not apply to the others. Yesh b'chagigah she'ein b'shtein, and there's a detail of the festival sacrifice that doesn't apply to the others. Yesh b'simcha she'ein b'shtein, and the joy offering also has a characteristic that isn't in the others. What are these? Yesh b'ri'iyah she'ein b'shtein. What is the characteristic of the pilgrimage sacrifice that the other 2 don't have? Shari'iyah ola kula. The pilgrimage sacrifice is an olah. It gets completely burned on the altar. Mashain can b'shtan, but the other ones are supposed to be enjoyed by the owner as well. Yesh b'Chagigah mashain b'shtan. What about the Chagigah, the festival sacrifice? What is unique about that? Chagigah yesh l'fnei dibur, because that occurred, or that was offered even before the revelation. Mashain can b'shtan, which does not apply. The pilgrimage and the joy sacrifices were only after, were only commanded at the revelation, only offered afterwards. So this kind of proves our point right here, that this is Rabbi Yossi Aglili saying that it was only the Chagigah that was brought before the revelation. And Yeshua, just to round it up, Yeshua Simcha Mashain B'Shtan, what is the unique characteristic of the Simcha, of the joy offering? Shah Simcha Noheges Banashim V'Nashim. That applies to both men and women, Mashain and B'Shtan. The other two are only men. Okay. Rabbi Shmuel, my Talmud called Mokum Asleil Kavei Shammai. Why do you apply? Why do you say that Rabbi Shmuel agrees with Shammai? Because if you think that the Ola offering at the revelation was in the category of the daily offering, so we said that the logic there was, well, it didn't have all the details of the daily offering, didn't have the flame, right? So and the daily offerings that were, that started afterwards, after the revelation, they did require the flaying and the taking it apart. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Amar Allah Shikiri Bamidbar Olas Tamil, but Rabbi Yossi Aglili said that the one at the revelation was in the category of the daily offering. So why didn't it require the skinning and dismemberment? But then the later Talmuds did require that. The Tanya, or we have a brayso, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Ola Shikiri Bamidbar, that Ola sacrifice in the desert did not require the skinning, because that rule only applied after the tabernacle was established. So it could still, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it could still be a tamid sacrifice, in the category of the daily sacrifices. You're going to ask me, it didn't follow all the rules, didn't follow the skinning rule, because the skinning rule was only instituted for a tamid, the daily sacrifice. It was only instituted after the tabernacle was built. But if you had a tamid before the tabernacle, it didn't require the skinning. So why wouldn't you say that Rabbi Shmuel takes the same position? So Sami become Rabbi Shmuel. Okay, you're right. That isn't a good proof about Rabbi Shmuel. We actually don't have any evidence which way Rabbi Shmuel ruled. So we'll take him out of the statement before. Now we're going to continue a little bit in the analysis of the sequence of events at Sinai. So the whole verse which refers to these sacrifices is as follows. Moses sent the young men of the people, and they offered olas, and they offered shlamim, sacrifices to God, harim, made of cows. Okay, now, how do you interpret this verse? What does the cows apply to, right? Where do you put the comma or the semicolon or whatever? Is it like they offered ola sacrifices, comma, and they offered shlamim sacrifices, which were cows? Or do you interpret it as they offered olas and shlamim, comma, they were cows? Meaning the cows modifier applies to both or just to the last one. How do you interpret this? So do you interpret the first part, the first clause in the sentence was olas, and that maybe could have been sheep. The second clause includes the modifier of cows for the shlamim. Or maybe the modifier applies to both types of sacrifices. Mar says, who cares? What is the difference? Mar Zutra says, what's the difference? The pisuk tamim. So that depends how you're going to read it. Like, how do you, so, you have this whole system of Tameh HaMikra, the cantillation of the Torah, right? If you go to shul on Shabbos morning and you hear the Torah read, it's with these notes, right? Not musical notes exactly, it's called cantillation. So how do you phrase things, right? How do you phrase it? It's important in how you phrase when you read it aloud. Ravacha B'rei, the Rav Amar Ravacha answers, why is it important? La Omer Harele Ola Ka'ola Shekru Yisrael Bamidbar. What would be the practical difference? If somebody says, I'm going to offer an Ola sacrifice like the Ola that was sacrificed in at the Revelation. Okay, my Parim Havu, Okvasim Havu. So now it makes a difference, right? Does the modifier of cows apply to that Ola or not? That would determine what this vow applies to. So why just take a, I don't know, good question. We'll leave that unresolved. Okay, let's leave it here and pick up here tomorrow.
Thank you, Dov. Have a good day, everyone. Stay well.